Councillor, or Mr. Campbell, the live stream's on.
Okay, very good. All right. So good morning, everybody. My name is John Campbell. I'm the chair of the Tenant Services Committee. For owing to COVID-19, we're meeting via the internet today rather than in person. And I will begin with acknowledging that the land on which we hold this meeting is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and many other First Nations. So we have some written deputations, and we have one public deputation that I know of, and that is on I believe that is on the CSU report, the last item in the agenda. So I'll look for someone to move approval of the meeting agenda. Okay, okay, moved by Marcel, seconded by Debbie. In favor? All right. Are there any declarations of possible conflict of interest? All right, seeing none. We move on to the meeting minutes, May the 4th, 2021. Are there any comments or corrections from those minutes? Councillor Fletcher?
No, I just have a comment, and I think this is when we established our committee, right? Looking at the VRP, etc. I think I'm just going to ask for the same thing that I did earlier. If we could just advance the scope of, or the proposed scope from staff, that would be extremely helpful.
Yeah, we can circulate that, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
For comment. Right. Yes, because I think this is a board-driven committee, so I think we should sign off on the scope, or I think it might be a committee, tenant services committee-driven process. Let's have everything 100% clear from the get-go. That'd be great.
All right. Okay, can I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes of May the 4th? Moved by Marcel, seconded by, we'll say, Debbie Douglas. All in favor? All right, thank you. Now, on the business arising, it is the compilation of all of the work in progress and the work that has been done to date recently by staff. Are there any comments or questions on any of the items on the business arising list?
Yes.
Could we, Sonia, could we open up the full screen and just assume that people have, oh no, we guess we have to do this. All right. I can't see the full screen. So Councillor Fletcher, you had something?
Yes, it's just under item 5, the corporate goals for revitalization initiatives. That would be the action item, management to report back on how we are addressing violence in revitalization communities. I think it was a bit broader than that. I hope it would also, is that coming up on the next chart, Dara?
So action item number 5 is employment opportunities for tenants related to corporate goals. And I believe there is a briefing note that follows the business arising that's part of the package this morning that seeks to address that action item.
Well, that action item there, management to report back on how we're addressing violence in revitalization communities. Is that specifically addressed somewhere?
Well, that's it. That's in number 5 on the agenda.
Okay, I'm just looking at number 5 on the corporate goal from the meeting minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor. I'm looking at the business arising.
No, I'm in the.
We're on to business arising.
It's very hard on. I apologize to everybody.
That's okay. All right.
Let me just get to that and make sure it's covering what.
Sorry,
All
I
right.
believe I understand. Item 5 in the meeting minutes from the meeting of May 4th has an action item, management to report back on how we are addressing violence in revitalization communities. And I
Correct.
believe that the intent, Sheila, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, is to address that action item through the work of the subcommittee.
Oh, I
Correct.
would agree with that. So, that is not, I believe I asked for that. So, I want to clarify, I'm in the business arising out of the minutes. Is that anywhere? This is business arising out of the minutes, actually, is where I'm at. My God.
Well, so what exactly is the question, Paula? Councillor Fletcher?
That very specifically is not part of that larger committee. That is very clearly, here's what's gone on in these communities. And here's the level, whatever, here's how we approach tenancy management. That's my intent here, because I asked for that. And hearing the response isn't exactly.
Sorry, actually, I'm going to correct myself. Counselor, action item number 2 on the list of matters arising from past meetings, I believe addresses specifically that request. Management to report back with how we are addressing violence in non-VRP communities from a tenancy management perspective, including how we are addressing violence in revitalization communities. And the note in relation to that is that it is addressed in report TSC 2021-53, which is part of today's agenda.
Yeah, I'm sorry to be difficult, but online with the tablet, trying to find the things, and it's already kind of blown off course a little bit. This is different. I'm not asking. We have our delineations coming back, and I've read the report on communities where there is not, there aren't significant violent communities. I happen to believe most of the revites are in that second category. So that is a specific issue that is very specific. So I'm just looking for advice here on how to capture the original request. It's very clear. So revite.
So I believe that is addressed in item 6G on today's meeting agenda, but if it's not addressed sufficiently, then my recommendation would be when we get to item 6G, if there's further work that's required, that we can address that at that time.
Thank you very much. And again, the issue, sorry, I'm still in business arising out of the minutes. Or are we done that?
We did the minutes. We're all just on the business arising, which is the update on staff actions.
Well, there might be business arising, the update on staff actions too. I think that's my problem.
What information specifically are you finding that's not covered here?
Well, I'm just looking at item 8, which is the 145 Strathmore, and just wanted to advise that that is still actively ongoing. Looking at now the seniors unit has been set up, the board's had its first meeting, we kind of have dual management, I guess. But it was referred to the tenants first group, and they're actively looking at how this came to be, whether it can still work, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wanted to advise the members because that came out of a public deputation last time under 8A.
Okay. All right. Any other members, anything further on the items of business arising? No? Motion to approve the staff work from business arising. Francis, moved by Francis. All in favor? There we go. Okay, so that's moved on. All right, now we move to the first item of the agenda, which is the appointment of the vice chair. So this is item 4, correct, Dara?
That's correct.
Okay, item 4, the appointment of Miss Debbie Douglas as the vice chair. Debbie, do you accept the nomination or the recommendation?
So I believe that Ms. Douglas advised at the governance committee meeting that in follow-up conversations between her and Ms. Farah, they are requesting that Ms. Douglas assume the appointment of vice chair of the governance committee and Ms. Farah accept the appointment of the tenant services committee.
Okay,
Is that correct?
That's correct. And I believe there was an updated note sent out by Sonia that I saw in the documents that we received.
And so we,
okay.
Apologies about that, Uba.
No, it's okay. Don't worry. Thanks.
and so we have
All
we
right.
have a motion that would appoint Uba Farah as vice chair of tenant services committee effective July 22nd, when the recommendation would be considered by the board.
All right, that sounds good. All right, so we just need to approve this for now, right?
That's correct.
All right, so all in favor? Very good. So moved. Okay. And then, all right, next item, community impact programs. Item 5, receiving for information. Which staff member, John or Sheila, who will be,
Mr. Chair, it's John here. I'll lead this in.
okay?
Mr. Chair, the report in item 5 provides an update on the community programs that were implemented in Q1. As you know, the TSC has an ongoing commitment to tenants to provide quality programs that either we directly deliver or in partnerships with community agencies. The report that is in front of the committee highlights a few programs in particular. And what I'd like actually to do, Mr. Chair, is turn it over to Nadia Gouveia, who's going to walk us through just a few highlights of the specifics of some of the programs, and also lead it into a presentation with Gail Johnson to highlight one of the initiatives, which is entitled Healthy Aging Program. And with that, Nadia, I'll turn it over to you and Gail.
Thank you, John. Between the programs and partnerships team and the regional teams, we've been able to continue to implement some very successful programs despite COVID. We've been able to pivot some of our in-person programs to virtual programs, including our Kickstart program in partnership with the Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment Foundation, our soccer camp program that's this year saw 134 children participate in the 6-week program. Other youth programs, including the GEM program and April Break virtual camp, were also delivered, supporting 15 and 25 youth respectively. Finally, in Q1, the East Regional team was able to launch a healthy aging program to support socially isolated seniors. I will turn it over to Gail Johnson, Manager of Community Safety and Support East, who will walk us through some of the program highlights. Gail? You're on mute, Gail.
There.
Sorry, we can't hear you, Gail.
Okay. How's that?
There you
That's
go.
coming
No?
through. Okay,
Okay now?
yeah.
Okay, so sorry about that. I guess that makes you part of the club if you're going to be muted like everyone else. So thank you for your time this morning. Ideally, it would have been nice to have my team with me here this morning, but our active living team is actually, this is our first day of Rookie League. So they're a little busy this morning. So they've left it to me, and we also would have liked to have had tenants with us. That would have been the ideal. But because many of the tenants, as seniors, are not particularly comfortable with virtual meetings, and also because 67% of our program participants are non-English speaking, this isn't necessarily their most comfortable way of participating. So we will actually, I have a short PowerPoint to give you a little bit of background on the program, and then some actual videos and quotes from some of our program participants. So I'm just going to pull up the PowerPoint. Share. There we go. I'm hoping everyone can see that. So again, thank you very much. And I hope you'll find that this helps you understand how we came to have the program we have today. The Older Adults program, actually in 2016, some funding became available for us to have some local active living staff as opposed to just the centralized funded programs. And that allowed us to both open up some of our gyms and run some after-school gym programs, but also to begin some older adults or seniors programs. The program provided a safe space for tenants to foster new relationships, learn new skills, experience new adventures, and develop self-confidence. The main focus of the program was to provide a space for socialization and prevent isolation and antisocial behaviors. There were over 200 tenants in 12 buildings across the city, gathering twice per week to socialize, share their skills, and practice self-care and get support. The idea, there you go, skipped a slide. I knew it didn't make sense. Let me just move this, sorry. The onset of COVID-19 put the Older Adult Community Impact Program on pause. The Community Impact team put their skills to use, though. They were still working, and so they began helping with door knocking for wellness checks, outreach for things like building elections. They were working in the community where there was an increasing need for the food bank support, and the Community Impact team became an important support to the food banks, especially in the buildings that had a lot of seniors. As they helped at the food banks, it became obvious that the older adults were becoming increasingly isolated and depressed. From this, the new Older Adults Connect program was born. The idea of just simply connecting came to mind, a conversation regularly with a trusted and familiar voice. The two senior program leaders, who are part of our active living team, began calling program participants. They were calling at first the folks who had been in the programs that they knew and that they were concerned about. Their goal was to reach out to 40 seniors. Within 2 weeks, the 40 participants had become 120. Tenants called each other, told their friends, passed the word, and now the two staff are regularly contacting 120 tenants a week. They receive the calls weekly or bi-weekly, depending on the tenant's needs. The calls may be a quick hello, or they may be half an hour or longer, again, depending on what the tenant is needing. The contents of the call is up to the tenants. So it could be just a quick check-in. It could be about health or personal matters or working through problems, or sometimes just chatting or telling stories or checking on the news. A number of tenants asked for help booking vaccination appointments, so we certainly did that as well. And a regular request is around food security. So if someone expresses a concern about they're running out of food or they need particular food, we make the connection, and in many cases, we've actually delivered the food to them. The program has now started connecting seniors together on conference calls. So it's no longer just a tenant and a staff. Now it is a group of tenants together, learning how to do conference calls and talking to each other. So the new program, at this point, we have 120 older adults. We're in 11 communities, and it is in senior and family buildings. So it's not just limited to the seniors buildings. So I do have some, we've got some quotes from some of the tenants that I'd like to quickly read for you. First, I appreciate the TCHC has been taking the efforts to care for the seniors in my building. Due to the quarantine caused by COVID-19, we seniors have been isolated in our rooms, being left feeling bored and helpless. Sadly, what we could do is just wait for death passively. There's Kathy Sal. Kathy is one of our active living staff who speaks Cantonese and Mandarin. Her phone calls have changed our life for the better and has improved our confidence. We are happier. She not only speaks with us daily, but also helped to release our mental stresses. With her phone call, we could sense the love and care. With her help, we could expect to solve the daily problems in a clear and effective way. We forward to TCHC developing more entertainment activities such as potluck, dancing, one-day tour, workshop, etc., that we can have an active and quality senior life. And from some of the adults at 65 Greencrest. Due to the quarantine caused by COVID-19, we seniors in the building have encountered many difficult times and situations. However, Ms. Kathy Sow has helped us to overcome them with a kind and careful heart. She has registered and delivered us food from the food bank. She has called us to go downstairs to receive cooked food from the meal program, helped us to book our vaccination shots online upon our request, and help us to do translations when necessary. Due to the language barrier, we Chinese seniors in the building cannot express enough gratitude for Ms. Zhao and the Seniors Connect program. We believe it's very important to have this role that she played to help us continually while providing the more services such as document translation and connection to community resources. We want to say thank you again for all the help and care provided by Kathy Zhao and Active Living. And we have some brief video clips as well of seniors who would like to share a message with you. Assuming I can do that. Okay. This is where you can see that I'm not the world's most, I had it working on here before. We may.
You know what, Gail, you could actually perhaps email that to us and we could.
I will do that, yes.
Members of the committee could see that?
Yeah, and then people can enjoy it at their leisure.
Sure.
So thank you for your time, and I hope you appreciate how much the community appreciates the support that's available through our funding and through our staffing. So thank you.
Very good. Anything further? Or we'll just take questions from committee members.
Yeah, I have.
Councillor Fletcher.
Sorry, Gail. Hi, nice to see you. You just said.
Good morning.
Good morning. You said through our funding and through our staffing. That was just the last thing you said. And I wonder if you could clarify.
Yep.
What
so
fund?
This is our direct funding and our part of the region in our active living budget.
So each region has
Fletcher, if I could clarify.
Yep.
So each region in our fourth service pillar, community safety and support. Gail is the manager of community safety and support in the East region.
Right.
She reports to Marva Jeffers, and her team is responsible for engagement in the East.
Okay.
What we're showcasing here in this presentation, we thought we've got staff out in each region doing work, delivering program to tenants, and we thought it would be good to come to you quarterly and give you an update on what's happening across the portfolio through community safety and support by way of program and feature a program. This month we chose the healthy aging.
So this is community support.
Correct.
Community safety and support, yeah.
It's the support part we're talking about today.
Correct.
That's right.
We're not talking about community safety. So there's a support pillar there that has to do with seniors. So you said it's not just it's in all, how many of the, first of all, Gail, your report is for the entire portfolio or for the East section region?
This is a project in the East.
Okay, so that needs to be clear. I guess, Sheila, that would be helpful to understand what the reports are for the other two regions. And just FYI, everybody, I'm going to ask for all the reports that we get to be broken out. I think it's good for our oversight function. Here's the reporting by region when we get to that.
Sonia, could you please pull the presentation down now, please?
I think it's
Sorry,
Gail.
I think I was sharing it. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Just have to, okay, wait a minute. I approve that for Sonia. You can do it now. I've given you approval. There we go. If I know how to. There you go. Okay.
Clarify, if you look at the Community Impact Program report, this is the Q1 report, we do call out the program by region. So the
Yes.
Kickstart program is in the East, West, and Central.
I understand. Other
Program.
I'm going to ask for the pest control, etc. That.
And
So
we're
for that. I'm just trying to get at this one with the seniors, if I can get at that, because I know you've now done by zone, by region, we requested. So I need to know how many buildings in the East region have gone over to the seniors, and how many buildings are you working in, Gail, that are only seniors buildings?
I believe we have 18 in the East that are only seniors buildings. They're all part of the seniors housing unit, but we still serve them all at the moment.
until the transfer happens from TCH to seniors, the operational transfer, which is scheduled for mid-year in 2022, at which point all operating functions for seniors will transfer. So until that time, TCHC is still responsible for operations in the seniors portfolio.
So the mid-year 2022, did you say?
That's what I've been told, yeah.
So next year, still responsible. But a report like this for seniors, for those buildings, actually need to think about transitioning some of these reports to the new
Sure.
board, so they understand everything that TCHC is doing and can make sure that the funding for those also transfers to the seniors. And I'm sure Jen's on the line somewhere here watching.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
Other committee member, Councilor Nunziata. We can't hear you, Francis.
Yeah, okay, so my question was for the west section, so that can you tell me in the west section which buildings, do you know, or do I have to wait for the report?
Nadia?
So currently this program was launched in the East and is only running in the East. We haven't expanded it to other regions. So every quarter we're trying to feature a different program in a different region. Some programs are citywide. This particular program is just in the East. We're also working to expand our programs that are working really well in one region to other regions. So this might be a program that we look to expand into the West and Central, for example.
But
Okay,
Nadia, if I could, you could provide the counselor with a list of programs that are occurring in the West.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so the reason I bring that up, and Sheila, at 1901 Weston Road, as you know, we have the York West Active Living Center, Senior Center, that
Right.
leases space in our building, and they have for the past 20 years, and they provide senior programming and activities for senior, and it's right at 1901 Western Road, where we do have a number of seniors. And the reason I ask that, because this group is well established, there's an opportunity for us to partner with this group, and like that they are doing and providing services to seniors, not just in the building, but in the whole community, but they also service the seniors that live at 1901 Western Road. So there is an opportunity for us, because they are a tenant of Toronto Housing, that we can partner with them and provide those programs, because they're doing an amazing job, and they get city funding as well. They do fundraising, so they do a lot of good work in that building. So I just wanted to bring that up, that I'd like to see maybe if there's a way that we can enter into a partnership with the York West Active Living Center, where they are providing an amazing program for seniors in the building and as well in the community.
That's great. I will absolutely follow up on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any further questions from committee members? No, I have a question. Nadia, what is the budget for these community programs?
So they range. I could get you the exact information on each of them. For example, the Kickstart program, MLSC funds most of it. So that's a foundation program. Rookie League is 50% shared with the J-Scare Foundation. So some of the programs we get external funding for, and some's part of our core funding.
Oh, okay. All right. So then what about the healthy aging program, for example? How much is devoted to that?
So we could get you the exact number. That program is coming from our core staff that we have on our teams already. So what our team was able to do was pivot from in-person programs where they would animate our gyms, which is part of what we do in terms of supporting the community, and actually use the staff to actually support senior tenants. So it's something that we were doing already. We just pivoted. So it's not necessarily that we're funding this program specifically. We were able to have our staff resources support this.
Got it. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, motion to receive the report. Moved by Francis. All in favor? That is approved. All right. Next item is the COO reports, the operational performance measures. Sheila, this will be John?
Correct.
John Campbell.
Yes, ma'am.
I know that Douglas has to leave at 10, and so we need to be quite parsimonious with our time. And I'm just thinking, given our time, starting late at 30, I wonder if we should that and have reordered in case we don't make it.
Debbie, is there something in particular you'd like us to jump through?
I wanted to be part of the conversation around 6, especially 6G.
All right. So.
And possibly 7.
All right. Why don't we finish this one that we've just started, the performance measures, and then we can move to 6B if everyone's in agreement.
That would be great, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Hi, Mr. Chair, if anyone needs to have the agenda ordered, including the presentation.
Right.
Else, if you don't mind, I think we need to have very strong agenda management, and I know you're very good at that.
Yes. Well, we did approve the agenda. That would have been the point to reorder it, but I'm happy to do it after we've heard the performance measures, and then we can do that. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So, John, would you like to go ahead?
Absolutely. So, Mr. Chair, the report that's in front of the committee provides an update on the performance measures for the operations division for the month of May. What I'd like to do is just walk through the report, provide some key highlights in each of the respective sections, then we'll be happy to take any questions from the committee members. As it relates to tenant calls to the call center, we had roughly around 3,000 more calls in the month of May. Primarily, these calls related to service requests that are electrical in nature, requests for repairs for appliances, as well as general inquiries for my information in the company, but as well complaints for antisocial behavior in the portfolio. With regards to service requests for elevators, these calls are down
John,
by 45.
By region? Sorry, I'm asking for that by region. Not by region in here, is it the 40?
It is not, Councillor Fletcher, but I will get that to you.
Well, it's not just me that wants it. I think part of our role is to make sure that there's no anomalies by region, that they're all functioning well and management has everything. That would help very much. Thank you. So on all of everything, John, I'll move that motion later if I need to, John Campbell.
All right. Okay.
Okay, we can certainly do that. In terms of demand pest treatments, these have decreased in the month of May. when compared to the 2020 average. This primarily coincides with the tapering off of previous treatments that were conducted. When we look at the vacancy rates across the company, the vacancy rate for the month of May was 2.04%. Specifically in the family portfolio, we had a vacancy rate of 1.80, which is a slight uptick from the month of April. And in the seniors housing unit, the vacancy rate was 2.78, again, a slight uptick when compared to April. When we look at the vacancies in the family portfolio, we continue to focus on what we call the hard-to-rent areas, primarily in the downtown core and the Sherbourne Strip. We've had to make some adjustments to a new system that was co-launched with the city, with Rain Cafe, so we're continuing to work with the city and our staff through that change. But in terms of the actions that we've continued to implement to tackle our vacancies, we had some success with the virtual showings that we conducted a few months back, right? We had to pivot in the light of COVID. The regions are exploring now doing a second round of virtual showings with selected buildings in each of the portfolio. We continue to progress through the rapid rehousing program, which is being done in partnership with SSHA. So these are units that are allocated through our pipeline, provided to the city, and we're able to house individuals from the shelter systems with, more importantly, the right supports in place. And to date, we've been able to house 180 individuals in 104 units through this program. In terms of we've received an extension from the city to bypass the overhouse waitlist. This extension now is in effect until the end of the year, and through that time, we'll continue to work with the city to put together a process for the single offer rule and to coincide with the launch of the choice-based system later in the year. As we looked at the rentable vacant units and non-rentable vacant units, the number of rentable vacant units have trended downwards since November 2020. Non-rentable vacant units have decreased by 126. A portion of these units have been transferred to long-term lease with partner agencies, and you'll see on page 4 and page 5, we've included a detailed table outlining the subcategories for non-rentable vacant units across the portfolio. So these include categories such as units that are being held for a revite, where repairs are required, being held for non-residential use, but as well those being held for transfer. And the subsequent tables 2 to 5, provides just a detailed breakdown by category, but as well as location with respect to each of these categories. With respect to arrears, the rent and parking arrears for the month of May was 15.04 million. Of that 15 million, 4.9 million are in repayment agreements. So these are instances where we've worked with the tenants to put them into agreements wherein we've been able to maintain their tenancies. Of the 15 million, 8 million is currently being managed, the legal process, so we continue to work with the tenants in providing support along the way. And the remaining 2 million are those that are not managed, primarily mostly new arrears. So with the launch of the new ACP, the arrears collection process, this is a new process that was co-developed with OCH late last year. And we put an increased emphasis on enhancing tenant contacts, but also working with them more closely and providing earlier intervention to provide tenant support. And you'll see table 7, for example, there are instances where we've been able to reduce unmanaged arrears. In some cases in the West region, we've been able to reduce it by over 500,000 since the beginning of the year. So the program is working with good effect. The teams are highly engaged and continue to work not only with the tenants, but also working closely with OCH to ensure that tenancies are maintained across the portfolio. With regards to crimes across the organization, across the portfolio with respect to property and persons, there was a slight uptick against crimes against property and persons. But again, when you look at the year-over-year change, there has been generally a downward trend of crimes against property and individuals across the portfolio. From a fire safety perspective, in the month of May, there were 26 fire incidents. Primarily, these incidents were related to arsons that were started on the property. These are cooking-related incidents and smoking-related incidents. To combat this, we have been and will continue to provide public education sessions, posters. Currently, we're working with Toronto Fire Services to identify the top 20 buildings with the highest prevalence of cooking fires, smoking-related incidents, to conduct target initiatives. And this is a program we normally run over the summer. We'll have to get a bit more creative and reimagine the program in light of COVID. So the team is just finalizing the details for that program and the rollout. I've inserted a section with regards to false fire alarms. Again, we continue to work with TFS to look at a targeted approach on how we combat false fire alarms in the portfolio. And that's going to take a team approach, both internally, but as well working with TFS on how we want to go about that in a meaningful way that will result in good effect. And last but not least, when we think about referrals for tenants, in the month of May, there were 821 referrals. Most of these were the supports provided during the third wave of the pandemic, and mostly related to connecting tenants to support, scheduling follow-up wellness checks, but also arranging meal and food hamper deliveries to units and tenants. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to take any questions or comments on the report.
Okay, thank you for your report. Questions from committee members?
Just one question. With the fires started by cooking, are those concentrated in senior buildings, or do you have the demographic breakdown?
Thanks for the question. I don't have the specific breakdown for the month of May, Debbie, but I can get that for you. In my experience with the portfolio,
just your general overall sense. I don't necessarily need specific numbers.
So generally, they're spread across the portfolio. Based on my experience with the program. Right? And now we've been seeing a lot more of them, especially during the start of the pandemic. Most folks are home cooking their own meals, so they're mostly spread out to the portfolio.
Okay.
Any further questions? No, seeing none. Okay, motion, Councillor Nunziata.
I've got questions, John.
Okay.
Third top.
Just a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. When it comes to rent and parking arrears, in some of these buildings, are the parking fees part of the rent, or is the parking separate? And does that also include where we have parking lots where people in the community park and pay?
Councillor, no, I'd like to bring that information back to you, unless Sheila is able to comment on it, but I don't have the information offhand.
I can. The parking arrears make up about $200,000-300,000 of the 10 million in arrears that aren't in repayment agreements. So the percentage of parking arrears is relatively small. We do charge tenants for parking, and it is arrears related only to tenant charge parking. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, does that include in some of our buildings where we have parking for the public, and they're charged? They have we have meters.
No, those arrears would be under the commercial unit. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Fletcher.
Just to stay on arrears for a second, is there a commercial arrears area? And how has COVID affected the arrears for commercial tenants?
So commercial tenants, we do track commercial arrears separately. We have seen an increase in arrears for commercial tenants. We did offer at the start of COVID a rent deferral program that many of our commercial tenants took us up on, but we would, to answer any detailed questions, Councillor, we'd have to bring back a separate report.
I think we should just spend a second there making sure we're ahead of the curve on the commercial side because of the pandemic. And I don't know if we were able to offer any of the rent programs through the federal government and the provincial government, quite possibly not, because as businesses, could they get that? And we would sign on their loan, 50-50?
Anything that we knew our commercial tenants could take advantage of. We pushed out to them. But to answer detailed questions, I'd have to bring back a separate report.
Something so we understand in case this blows up at a certain point, once things are back open and people are going to be very far behind, we should really have a plan around the commercial rent side. That's my advice here from this. So can we start breaking that down?
We can. We have it.
Okay, that's good.
We'll bring it to
in the arrears in numbers attachment table 7, we'll go to table 2 first, which is, first of all, I'll just ask you, John, later under the pest management, is that broken down by region later on in one of the reports, demand pest treatments?
I'm not sure if it is. I'll have to see.
So I was reading about them because, of course, oh no, it's broken down by number of times there's been treatment. So again, going back to having things by area, I think is really important. So that is table 1 is I'm interested in the non-rental units, and there looks like there's a tremendous number attached to revitalization, but what I'm reading here is that 761 waiting to be demolished. What period of time do they sit empty before they're being demolished? Do we have some sense of that?
We could get that, for sure.
But that when it comes to the board. So there, and then there's ones that are waiting, demolished, have undergone construction and are pending replacement. So I think I need to understand for the 548 have been demolished. So they don't count as units anymore unless they're notional units, perhaps should be separated out. And what does it mean or have undergone construction and are pending replacement? I don't understand that. Page 59.
Councillor, we'll break down the 570 or the 671 and the 548.
Okay, thank you. And then new ones that are built waiting for someone to move in and can take 6 months. That's understandable. All right. So just understanding that these aren't just empty old units sitting out there. They're very specific. And because it seems like a very high number for the number of active revitalizations. So it's helpful to understand how many in each community, et cetera, and how long they're going to sit empty. Because it looks kind of bad when you have hundreds of units just sitting empty and then the windows start getting broken, blah, blah, blah. Thank you for that. And it is right down by east-west. Thank you very much. And seniors. I want to go to number 7, the arrears by region. Table number 7, page 62. And I am concerned that there is such a high arrears in the West, $6 million in arrears. Central is 4 and East is basically 2.5. The seniors are 1.2. Just tell me again how many units are in each of the zones, please, each of the regions, if you have that off the top of your head.
So each region has about 14,000 units. In the West, all of the units are direct managed. So that $6 million includes the contract managed units that have returned to direct managed. And that's why you see a larger number in the West.
Well,
so they're getting the contract managed unit arrears under direct managed portfolio, under the direct managed portfolio.
So are you telling me that in transferring in the contracted out units, we also transferred in a debt of probably 2 million in arrears.
Right.
That's correct, Councillor. It's 2 million that we took in.
And 2 million, but those were broken out over the districts because, you know, my district now has half of the east. The boundary moved over. The boundaries all moved. But some of the central must have picked up some of those arrears too, John.
With the shift, they would have. There would have been a shift when we moved the boundary.
So do you know how much shifted over into the central?
I don't have it offhand, Councillor. I'll have to get it.
It might not be. Okay, so that's really shocking news that under contract management that there's that amount of arrears. Were you surprised by that? Or did you know that already?
Yeah, it's part, we had a pretty good understanding of that before we returned them to direct management.
So when we would get our reports, Sheila, that were arrears reports, we wouldn't know what the arrears were under the contract managed buildings apparently, because only now are we figuring that out. Or do you know already what they are?
We track them.
Okay. So I'm going to assume that there's still some arrears out there because I think it would be helpful under arrears to know how many contract managed buildings we still have. I know we still have Greenland. I think there's still a couple. Did all of the Dells come in or not?
So the Dell portfolio came in the west, not in the east.
Okay, so Dell came in the west and brought in 2 million in arrears. And that was for a pretty small number of buildings. Why don't we just hear about the contract managed buildings and arrears and by zone, et cetera, if you don't mind. I think that would be helpful.
All right.
If some
Can we
can
set that as an undertaking for staff to provide that kind of a briefing note or briefing note update?
As part of this breakdown,
Absolutely.
have a few more
Okay.
arrears information, because when we contract out buildings, we're also contracting out collection of rent.
Correct.
Looks like not happening at the same pace or that we would expect or that we're able to do ourselves, right?
Okay, I would like to see if we could move on so that we can accommodate Debbie Douglas and her interest in. Do you have anything further, Councillor Fletcher?
No, I appreciate that. I just wanted to ask, I think I'm just going to move that here, that all future reports be broken down by region.
Disaggregated by region. All right, so that's a motion from Councillor Fletcher. All in favor? Okay, so that is moved. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm good.
Now, and I'll take it as a motion from you, Paula, that we reorder the agenda and that we go from 6A to 6G and then followed by 7.
Yeah, and actually, John, you can actually go back because I don't necessarily have anything to say about number 7. It's the report to the police
All
board.
right, so just 6G then. All right,
Yeah.
so that is moved by Councillor Fletcher. All in favor? All right, so we've reordered the agenda and we'll move to addressing violence in non-VRT communities. That's item G. And I'm turning that over to Mr. Anderson here.
Sorry, John Ankel is going to present that.
John, I'll speak to this.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, the report that's in front of the committee for 6G provides an update to the committee on how TCHC addresses violence in non-VRT communities. As you're aware, TCHC services that are delivered at the front line are done so through the 4 service pillars. Within the tenancy management pillar, we ensure that the delivery of tenancy management activities, including providing access and support to our tenants. It works with the community safety and support pillar through a symbiotic relationship. As incidents arise in our communities, where appropriate, we will work with the community safety and support pillar to address and support our tenants in targeting these issues. The tenancy management pillar involves addressing violence or issues directly with individuals or tenants. In instances where violence or issues persist, TCHC may choose to escalate through different means to evoke a change in behavior. as well through this process. There are instances where staff recognize that supports are required with tenants, and in those cases, we work internally between the regions and the newly created Tenancy Resolution Office, but as well as community agencies to provide those supports. And with that, Mr. Chair, that provides a highlighted report. I know that Richard Grosh, Tenancy Management Pillar Co-Lead, is online, and between the both of us, we'll be happy to take any questions from committee members.
Very good, thank you. Okay, so let me just, Debbie, you have some questions?
John went through that so quickly. I'm not sure I caught. I'm not sure I caught. I caught most of it, John. I actually wanted to use this opportunity to raise the Neptune issue, but just in terms of what it is that you said, John. I'm not clear when you talk about having synergies or making connections. Who are these other organizations that you call on for support? What's the relationship between TCHC's crisis response and the City of Toronto's crisis response? Who has jurisdiction for what? And this came up for me. I think over the weekend I read a news story. Maybe it was the shooting on Friday evening, where it talked about the city staff being online, and or was it something before? But Sheila issued an apology of some sort. So I wanted to know how it is, and this has come up before, as you know. There is another incident that came to the board where some tenants, and I believe there is still a legal case about that, if I'm not wrong, Dara. So I'm just trying to figure out who are all the players around our response to violence in communities. And how do you differentiate between when the city takes the lead and when TCHC takes the lead?
So I can start, Director, with the incident that happened at Tandridge, which was incredibly horrific. 3 children shot during a birthday party on a Saturday evening. We connected, as we always do, where there are homicides on TCH property. We connect with the crisis response team to coordinate how we're going to provide support. So in instances like that, our first responders, always, the first people on site are our CSU. They work closely with TPS, but our community support pillar, right, the team that you started to get introduced to today, we have access and support staff who work with the crisis response unit to be on site to support tenants. And my apology that I issued regarding the Tandridge incident was around the fact that when the incident happened on Saturday evening, we had CSU on site. We made connection with the crisis response team on Sunday morning, 7 a.m., coordinated a meeting to be on site on Monday morning, and realized as the events of the day unfolded that we should have had more staff on site earlier on Sunday. So we work very closely with the crisis response team. When an incident happens, there are staff on both teams that connect to work out who's going to be on site when. The agencies that we connect tenants to are many, varied, and I believe Nadia Gavaya is on the line, our Director of Program and Partnerships, and she could fill in some details there. Nadia?
So typically we connect with local agencies, and that's led by the region. So in the West, we would have West agencies that are participants. So for example, in Tanridge, we brought in the local agency supports into the community meeting, and they're the ones that typically provide counseling services, on-site services, any kind of follow-up support. But through our partnerships within the regions, through the community safety and support pillar, that's where those partnerships are led.
Debbie, anything further?
Yeah, I had a problem on muting. My question just went right out of my head. Nadia, how do you determine which service will come on? And is that an established relationship that organizations expect to have services? But actually, the question I wanted to ask as well, is your team also responsible for relocation in case that you've deemed that there's a safety issue for the families?
So my team isn't responsible for relocation, so I'll turn that over to John and Sheila. But in terms of the partnerships, it's typically based on the local relationships that are pre-established in the communities. So oftentimes it would be an agency that's on site that's supporting tenants. Sorry, I'm hearing a lot of feedback, so I don't know if you can mute, please. Yeah, so we typically have agencies that are already on site that have established relationships with our communities. And so those are usually the ones that are the go-to in terms of relationship maintenance. CCRP does oftentimes make recommendations of other additional agencies to provide support. So it's typically driven by what the tenants are asking for and the needs in each respective community. So it varies community to community, but depending on what the tenants are asking for and requesting, that's when we provide the support that they're asking for, if that makes sense. So there are some agencies that are already working in the communities, and those are the ones that typically have the relationships that we work with. And if there's additional support that's required from the tenants, we work with CCRP and local partners to bring in additional support.
Thank you. The relocation question, John?
So, Director, if I may, I know Richard Grosh is online. He'll be able to speak in greater detail regarding the relocation and transfer process that goes through his office.
Good morning. Yes, we do have the crisis priority transfer process. That's a process that was established and engineered in 2018 in consultation with the City of Toronto. There's intake specialists who would gather the information, work with the household to identify what their support needs are, as well as their relocation needs, and then relocate those individuals as quickly as possible.
Richard, do the families have a choice in which area of the city? And I'm asking that because I continue to hear concerns, and I'm sure Uba will speak to this as well. So do families have the final say in where they are relocated?
They do have a choice in their relocation, so they do identify geography, and obviously we know the unit size, so they do have a geographical preference. The challenge is that we are subject to availability based on our vacancies.
But, Director, if I could, we do understand that there are tenants may have issues, problems in certain geographic areas in the city, and we work very hard with tenants to respect those.
Uba, you had a question. You look as if you were looking to speak. Sorry, John.
That's okay. Go ahead, Uba.
Yeah, just to echo what Debbie was asking, I know TCHC provides based on vacancy and what they have, but the issue is, and I'm continuous hearing this from different tenants through my work and through lived experience, that sometimes tenants are transferred from one area that is problematic or dangerous to another area that is sometimes worse than that. And I mean, understand we're trying to support people, but sometimes I'm thinking that defeats the whole purpose of the transfer, because if somebody is feeling more dangerous or their life's at risk more, then what's the purpose, you know? So I was wondering if, and I know this might be a higher level conversation, but I was wondering if TCHC can have maybe units in private area or units that is absolutely safe for people, or if people can go back to on the wait list, and maybe if we can merge the two this transfer with the SPP transfer. So in a nutshell, what I'm saying here is a lot of people, and I'm not exaggerating when I said a lot of tenants are saying, I'm not safe where I'm at right now, and I appreciate the crisis transfer, what they're trying to do, which is to transfer me quickly. But often people are ending up similar situations, if not worse. Thank you.
And if I could, Director, that's why we formed the Tenancy Resolution Office, the office that Richard Groach leads, to be able to respond more effectively to those issues, because we are very aware that they exist, and it is not acceptable to transfer a tenant from a bad situation into a worse situation. And Richard, I'll just ask you to highlight some of the efforts that you make to avoid that.
Absolutely. So it is a long, extensive chain of communications that we do have with every individual who applies for a crisis transfer. And to your point, there is two options. You can apply through the crisis, or you would have the option of going through the centralized wait list. So there is two options. Obviously, the crisis process is the faster of the two, and we want to, manage the risk by getting the transfer done in a quick way. The other piece is that it's not always just about the transfer. It's also about the debriefing and the social supports that can be linked to the household as part of the transfer. So relocating of the household is one part of it, but also we have CSCs, both through the Tenancy Resolutions Office and at a local level, that will also work with the household to identify what aftercare and supports that the individual requires. We want to make sure that transfer is a successful one.
And I appreciate that, John, because you're right. It's a holistic approach. It's not only one thing. So it's great to have it's great to have that support. But the main concern is the safety piece. We can provide as much counseling or support and debriefing and what have you. But if the person feels I'm in danger here and I'm going to be more in danger there, that is the piece that we need to go back to and review and look at it. And I'm willing to sit with you and Sheila and just to talk about in depth. Sure. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
Let's do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions from committee members?
Yep.
Councillor Fletcher.
I think this is a really important one. I think everybody's guessing that this board and this committee is very focused on issues around violence in communities and how well it's being addressed, and making sure that we have, the most robust approach possible and delineating a whole number of things. So just on that last issue, I'm going to ask if anyone who's been moved in the way we're talking about after an issue, has anyone ever followed up to find out, kind of a survey that worked for them, or that there were problems for them? And whose job is that?
So that issue would fall to Richard Groach as our Tenancy Resolution Officer. I don't believe, Richard, that we have done a survey, but do you follow up with tenants?
So one of the things that we have implemented is follow-up. It's not about just facilitating the relocate and the file closes, but rather actually look at 6 months, 12 months, and 1.5 year check-in through the intake specialist to kind of review what works, what doesn't work, and that should drive process change.
When did you start that? We
started that in the last 6 months as I took on the program.
Okay, but finding out whose job is it, because I see Gail has that job, which is a really important job. Whose job is it to check in and say, how's it going for you? Any issues, that kind of thing, right away?
It will be the intake specialist who facilitated the actual transfer. That's where the relationship is strongest currently.
Sure that's done and what the answer. So you could talk to your intake specialist and find out how things are going, correct? mean, we have that info then.
Correct. Correct. They've built it into their process.
Well, just now they've built it into their process?
In the last 6 months, as we took on the program as part of the new tenancy resolutions office.
All right, so prior to that, there was no follow-up. So let's,
Which
sorry?
established in 2019. The TRO was part of restructuring that was approved in 2019.
Yes,
September.
Richard's just said that that actual follow-up has only been
Yeah.
instituted within the last 6 months.
Right.
So I'm just thinking of all the hundreds of people that were never connected again. So, you know, I saw the community support team. That's obvious. How's it going? Everything okay? Unless that's going through the tenancy management people, but that's very specific. Follow-up. It's a little different. So
Right.
I'm interested in that, not just at 6 months, whatever, but are you settled? Is it okay? So I don't know if it's a survey, but some of the feedback from there. I think that I just want to go back to when an incident happens. There's the focus on there's the focus on whoever has suffered, and then the larger community. I've been to many of these, and it's an important outlet. But I'm not sure that it makes the community any safer. The issue for me is if I don't know who's in the community, or if somebody from outside the community, or we know there's problem tenancies in there, or there is somebody that's being focused on who's in the community who's a problem tenant. I don't know how that workup is done, but many of our communities are being terrorized, and it deserves not just a meeting after the event, but a focus on these communities. So one of the things that I'm hoping we'll get to is Tan Ridge. Is it one of our BRP sites? I don't think so.
It's not.
But there's sites that have identified. So when the CSU and the tenancy staff, you know, our operations staff are meeting with the police divisions. Obviously, folks know who the problem tenants are. And
Right.
I always start with problem tenants because they're making problems for all the tenants. And just not sure that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing we have a meeting and CCRP's there and all these people are there. That's not exactly what I'm interested in. And then the issue around the revitalizations, when there's problems there, those are managed separately. So Sheila, at what point will the staff that have relationships with tenants, but no requirement for tenancy management, be brought under your leadership once you're back at, or John's leadership now, or your leadership as COO, and out of the Revite side? I mean, all the tenancy relation issues should be with the specialists. They're not with the specialists. They're with people that specialize in designing and building buildings. So there's a misalignment here, and I'm interested in getting that started. When will that happen? Or maybe you're not thinking it's going to happen, but I'm very focused on it happening now.
So that is currently under review through the work that we're doing with the city and Create TO on transferring the development division, aspects of the development division to Create TO. What will stay behind in TCH? How will Revite and engagement be aligned with the region?
I'm basically questioning whether we have to wait. Tenancy functions, the relocation of tenants into other places, and the functions that deal with tenancy, whether it's a Revite or whether it's Gail's program in East Region, are the same. It's got to do with the management, and the follow-up on the sites also has to do with watching, knowing, bringing them under TCHC management yes, with all of the benefits of a revite. But I don't, we have the alignment, and I don't think we have to wait. So I don't know if you'd like a motion today to initiate tenant-related functions in the revite section to be aligned with tenancy-related functions and to come back as soon as possible.
So we're actively working on that. I would like an opportunity to talk to my counterparts in the city about when and how that comes back.
It doesn't, I'm saying as a board, we can advise you certain things. There's no reason, nobody who's managing a relocation for a tenant is going to be moving to create TO. Tenancy functions are staying at TCHC. So I'd like to see that alignment begun under tenancy specialists.
Great.
You are the tenancy specialist. We've set up a whole system to have tenancy focused delivery. And we have a part of it sitting outside managed by non-tenancy specialists. And I think that's a disconnect that we can fix internally. It's not, does not have to be part of anything else. The development function's moving. The tenancy side of it isn't going to move anywhere. So I'm asking for that. What that would.
Sorry.
I would.
I'm just, if there is a motion, I'm not sure I understand what the motion is. The suggestion seems to be that the tenancy management staff don't operate in the revite communities, and I don't believe that's my understanding, but I'll defer to Sheila on that point. Is that the motion that's being proposed, that there be a move to have tenancy management engage in the revite communities?
No, the motion
Okay.
to have the staff that deal with the tenants side of revitalization be housed within the corporation that deals with tenants, tenant specialists, which is our COO, current, acting, etc. Because managing tenancy issues is a specialty, kind of like asking a general manager to go and manage the architectural or building side of a revitalization. You're not going to do that because that's not their area of expertise. So it has to do with our management alignment for staff.
I'm not clear how this relates to the addressing violence in the non-VRP communities.
You're right. I'll tell you how, because we don't have the same approach to managing tenants in those same communities. It's different. That's why.
Is that true? Sheila?
Yes.
So there is a revite and engagement team that currently reports up to the development division, that is involved in relocating tenants, that is involved in supporting communities through revite, not in crisis. What we're talking about now is how we support communities in crisis. So the councillor is correct, that function will remain with TCHC, and I believe what the councillor is asking for is how will that function line up under our regional structure, which it will.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheila, for translating for everybody, because communities in crisis can be revitalization communities in crisis. We've seen that.
Right.
So that's how it's tied to this. So I'm not going to belabor it. You know what I'm looking for, Sheila? I can move them all. You can come back and help me. I think the faster we align the management functions, or that you align them, that's the request, to look at realignment of management.
So if I may, I have a question for, are there any other committee members with questions? Sorry, Marcel and Francis. Marcel?
Yeah, I have a couple of things. I just need to be some clarification on something. So a community has, say, an act of violence or say a shooting, right? Then the police and CSU show up. And then who else shows up after that?
So that is an excellent question. So we have TPS and CSU on site doing what they need to do. We bring to site, you met Gail Johnson a few minutes ago. Gail Johnson is a manager of community safety and support. We had a tragic shooting over the weekend of a 16-year-old. Gail Johnson and her team were on site over the weekend with the crisis response unit to respond to that violent incident. And they would work with tenants, understand what their needs were, and provide whatever agency supports were required. So that's how we respond to a crisis.
Okay, and then so they show up and they stay there for how long? A couple hours, the whole day?
They're there for as long as tenants need them to be there.
And then if they make the... Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say CSU is on site for a minimum of 72 hours. The access and support team and the city's crisis response team are on site for as long as tenants need them.
And then, okay, so, and then if there's extra support that's needed, they outreach to whatever agency that's providing that support, right?
Exactly.
How quick is that turnaround time?
So the first shooting that I described at Tandridge happened Saturday evening. We had CSU on site throughout. We were going to give CSU and TPS 24 hours to do what they needed to do and be on site, the two teams, the access and support team, the crisis response team, Monday morning. Sunday, we realized that we needed people there, and we got people there, I believe, about 5 o'clock on Sunday.
Okay, and then so that's all, that's done and everything, but is there like any kind of ongoing support to help tenants that are, because an incident like that is going to create a lot of PTSD in people, right? So the community's going to be traumatized. So is there any kind of like ongoing support for that community to actually work through that, the grieving process, the shock, the fear, all those things, work them through it so that they can be better prepared, you know, like to address if they're feeling something so that they can be educated in what's going on. And yeah, like I got tons of questions, but I don't think there's enough time.
Right. So those teams provide ongoing support. Is it deep enough, broad enough? We would have to reach out to tenants, as Councillor Fletcher indicated, and do follow-up, which we're, as Richard pointed out, we're starting to do more of that follow-up now. But you're absolutely correct that these are traumatizing events in our community.
Yeah, it's just like, just simple things, like even like, you know, the other day, or on the weekend, people were letting off fireworks. The loud bang and the repeated bang sometimes, if you're traumatized through gun violence, anything like that's going to set you off, right? Or if you're going to hear a car speeding at you and screeching, it's going to set you off. Or you see people running, it's going to trigger all that stuff, right? And so it just, yeah.
Any further questions, Marcel?
No, I'm good.
Councillor Fletcher or Councillor Nunziata?
Thank you. So my question and my concern is, and I share the same concerns that were discussed from previous speakers, but is with the problem tenants. So obviously, and we know that for a fact, we do have tenants that are walking around with guns in the building, outside the building, and then there's, you know, an incident. So these tenants where the police are aware and we're aware that that is happening. What is the process for eviction, and do we have an aggressive eviction? Because some of these buildings where we're having problems, tenants are feeling, are afraid because of some of the tenants that we have living in our buildings that are actually walking around with guns.
Yeah, so we've built I believe a stronger system in restructuring to respond to those incidents. So and we actually piloted this response in Rivertown, in Councillor Fletcher's area, and it's showing results. So when an incident happens in community, CSU is there. They made 17,000 calls in 2020. CSU is there. They record the incident in their database, which has high levels of privacy and control. That incident is extracted from that database, whatever it is, and put into our work order system so that the team that manages tenancy can pick that up and deal with it. If it's a noise disturbance, it's a letter. If it's something more serious, there's the next level of action taken with the tenant. If it's serious enough, we would move through our tenancy management team for eviction. So we built a process that takes incidents that happen in community into the tenancy management side of the company so that the general managers with their managers, supported by legal, can move in those extreme cases where tenants can't live safely in a community to eviction.
Yeah, because I remember at one time there was a long process for eviction, especially when, you know, we have people, tenants that are, you know, they have guns and they're walking around with guns in our buildings. So it's really important that when the police are involved, and there are, in fact, and we know there are tenants that have guns, that we go through a very aggressive process where we can evict, because I don't think it's fair to our tenants that they have to live in a building where they feel threatened and they're afraid to walk around the building or in the lobbies because of, you know, that we do know, in fact, that we do have tenants that have guns, as we know. Right?
Okay. Uba.
I just have a quick question. I agree with both councillors, and we shouldn't have few people terrorizing the rest of good people and community members. But my question is, let's say, hypothetically speaking, there is a family of 4, 2 kids are great, you know, youth, a hardworking mom or dad or both, and one person is the one who's creating the problem, and we need to evict that person. So do we evict the whole family, or do we evict that individual who's creating the problem?
I'm going to ask Richard Groach to answer that question. It is an excellent question and one that we're seized with often. Richard?
Excuse me. So from the legal end of things, you're technically terminating the tenancy, which would be the whole household. That is a decision process that we need to go through. And when working with a household that's having these kind of things going on. So where it's one individual as part of a household, we need to work with that household to remedy some of the behaviors that's putting their tenancy at risk. So eviction itself is the most severe of responses we can do.
And I'll just,
I think, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to supplement. I mean, the challenge that we face is accurately described by Richard. The eviction process speaks to the relationship between the landlord and the tenancy, and oftentimes in those circumstances, the problematic resident of the unit may not, in fact, be the person on the lease. And so, if we're talking about an aggressive eviction practice, that will impact somebody who's on the lease, but not necessarily as the person who's creating problems. But I know that Richard's team will work with that person who is the representative of the household on the lease to resolve the kind of issues that you've identified as an alternative to evicting the entire household?
I know some cases where the whole family, one person, the person who is creating the problem is also either a leaseholder or not a leaseholder, but an occupant, meaning a child or brother or extended family. And some families are saying you can evict this individual, but save the rest of the tenancy, and that doesn't happen. And I personally think that's kind of what I'm 100% agree not to have people, walking around guns and what have you and terrorizing people. I also kind of disagree to evict an entire family based on one person when we can evict that individual and say, don't come to the premises, you're not allowed, and put other, mechanism in place. So I think we should look into that process.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions, I have a question for Richard. How often do we, what is the frequency with which we relocate families for safety reasons?
It's quite high. So we manage about 160 crisis priority transfer applications per month.
Wow.
Now, those could be for a variety of different issues, and not necessarily all of them receive a crisis transfer, but rather additional support. So by and large, I think about 30% of all applications, so of the 160, 30% are actually approved transfers in a month. The remainder of those, they don't necessarily meet the criteria for a transfer. But that does not mean that the work stops. That means we shift to a different response, which means working with the family to identify what support needs they have required, and making their tenancy successful and comfortable within the community they're working at or living at. Excuse me.
So that's quite a high number. Then you're saying it's quite.
It is.
Yeah, that's a lot of resources devoted to getting people moved. And how once a family has been identified or has identified themselves in need of a move, how quickly does it happen? Does it happen? You did sort of refer to this earlier. It depends on the vacancies and when they can, just I mean, I recall when I was a counselor, there was somebody who wanted to move and it took quite a long time. Are you able to move people generally within 2 to 3 months?
Generally speaking, if it's a 1 or a 2 bedroom unit, we can move them within that 2 month window. It's when we get into unit sizes of 4 or 4+ bedroom size, it becomes a significant challenge.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Any further questions from the committee members?
Yes, I do.
Councillor Fletcher?
I guess in taking up just what Ub is talking about, there are some pretty significant measures that can be brought to bear even when there are households. If there's a problem tenancy, if you have a major problem tenant living there, whether it's the leaseholder or a problem tenancy. So I'm really always interested in managing problem tenancies very carefully, how many there are in communities. And there are bail checks. There is what we're talking about once somebody has been convicted, whatever, trespassing.
Trespass, yeah.
We are somehow haven't renewed the trespassing, so we need to understand if to Uba's point, there's somebody who's now trespassed out of the community, that means they shouldn't be coming back. So it's having sympathy for the family, but understanding that there are hundreds of households there that now are unsafe because of tenants who are creating problems or who have difficulties, etc. So focusing on the tenancy management is really critical. And I just, I feel like that, Sheila. Find the problem tenant, manage the problem tenant, bring everything to bear on them, and often things get settled. But if you have a bail requirement and you're not there, there's only one person that can check it, and that's the police. So have things well managed and brought under one roof. I'm all about the one roof. That to me is one of the keys. And I don't think we're there yet, but we're on the path.
We're on the path, and you know that, we have 3 regions. we have 89 tenant service hubs where communities, 300 to 400 units with an integrated team who meet weekly so that we can bring, as the councillor indicated, all parties under one roof to consider what's happening in the community, is reasonable enjoyment being impacted, what tenancy management actions can we take? That's where we're heading.
Good, thank you.
Okay, anything further? I'll just, Uba.
No, just I agree 100% with Councillor Fletcher to have that management under one piece. And also, I don't know if I missed earlier, are we going to have a survey where we check people who went through crisis transfer every 6 months, every 3 months, once a year? What are we doing with that in terms of the survey? Thank you.
Richard, could you answer that, please?
So we've already established the process in which we're doing the 6-month check-ins times 3, but we could look at formalizing that through a formal survey and report back in the future the outcomes of that survey.
Thanks, Richard.
I'm just interested in somebody following up from community support that says you're there. How's it going? Got any problems? And I'm just going to say one more thing, John, and I'm sorry I'm talking so much. At Grove, when the revitalization was being approved by the city and that committee, tenants came down and one of the tenants said to the committee, please be careful where you relocate me. You can't relocate me anywhere. If you put me in Driftwood, now there's a target on my back. And that has not been one of the factors that's been built in. It was very clear because he had to beg us, you get 3 spaces, go to there. The same with, you get offered places for your crisis transfer. You have to have the right spot for your crisis transfer where it's going to keep using. So that is my experience with understanding where people are moving, that we might just create more problems if we're not listening to what the community actually knows, which is who's got a grudge with who if you're moving them around, particularly in revitalizations. And I don't think we've been smart enough about that in the past.
That's my experience and that's my frustration as well. Thank you, Councillor Fletcher, for saying that.
So perhaps in lieu of having staff formalize a survey process, when will we be reporting out again on this very topic, Sheila? Will this be reported? Is this a report that comes to the committee every 6 months or so?
Well, I think I'm hearing a request to do that, and we can report out on that biannually. Number of crisis transfers, follow-up feedback from tenants, from community.
I think that would be welcome. Do we need a motion for that, Dara, or can that just be sort of a staff undertaking that we know that they're going to come back, in less than a year's time to give us an update on this?
I think I've heard Sheila say that we'll just build that into our work plan.
Okay, does that sound fine, Uba? Uba, does that sound fine to you?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I need a motion to receive this information, this report, moved by Councillor Nunziata. All in favor? All right. So now we'll go back to the item number 6B, the tenant complaints update. And perhaps we can assume that the report has been read and ask directors, committee members, if there are any questions on that report. Any questions? No? Okay. Have a motion to receive that information moved by Councillor Nunziata. All in favor? All right. Next item is the tenant engagement refresh. This is something that's always of keen interest as we follow this process. And Sheila, do you want to just talk about what's transpired, or John, in the last, since we've met the last time?
So I can just do a very high level.
That's good.
We have, as we were directed by committee, we broke the tenant engagement refresh down into phases that were set out based on readiness in community. The details of where we're at are captured in the report under Table 1. Phase 1, 57 communities, 39 have leaders in place. We're still working on 18 that have partial leaders in place or no leaders. You see in the chart below, there's been a series of by-elections, and we've been able to get full leadership in place in Phase 1 and additional 4 of the 18, partial leaders in 5, still working on 9. So it's a process. We move through a phase, we get full leadership in place, partial leadership in place, follow up with by-elections to complete a phase. We've moved into Phase 2A and 2B. Those 170 communities, 95 are active and have leaders in place. 75 of those 170 we're still working on and will require further by-elections. When we complete Phase 1, Phase 2 will move into Phase 3. So we are making steady progress. I've asked for a breakdown by hub, and of the 89 hubs that we have, 80 have full leadership or partial leadership in place. So it's our goal to have tenant leaders in place in all 89 hubs by the end of 2021. So we'll continue to move through this cycle.
Okay, thank you. Questions from committee members? I need to be able to see the whole screen. There we go. Questions from committee members? Okay. I don't see any. So Sheila, maybe you could just clarify for me. In Table 1, it's got total communities 57 in Phase 1, Phase 2A and 2B. So why are, and then there's 170, and then Phase 3, 103 communities. So why are some in Phase 1 and some in Phase 3?
It depends on the readiness of the community, right? Some communities were fully engaged, knew who that chose the committee structure, knew who their committee members were. Fairly straightforward process for them to nominate leadership. Some communities that chose the tenant rep model, their reps were ready to go, so they would be in Phase 1, Phase 2A. Some communities, the engagement team needed to do more outreach, have more contact. So we're tailoring the process to meet the needs, the readiness of community.
Okay. And then it says, so for Phase 3, there's a total of 103 communities. So are there 330 communities in total? Is that what this breakdown is? So what am I?
30 communities that translate into the 89 hubs.
And so what am I to understand in Phase 3, there's 103 communities. It says leaders in place and then partial leaders in place and no leaders, and it's all just blank.
So Phase 3, we haven't initiated a detailed process yet. These are communities that are the furthest away from being ready. They don't have community tables sitting. they don't have tenant reps identified.
Okay,
We still have to work in those communities.
okay, all right, and okay. So, so in some cases, you're finding just a general unwillingness for people to get involved.
Yeah, it's
And is that
some
probably,
of it
is that like,
related.
sorry, you say COVID related?
COVID related.
Yeah.
Tenants don't want to come together. Tenants don't have access to technology for them to come together.
Got it, okay. All right, any other committee members have questions? No? Okay, can a motion to receive the report?
I do.
Sorry, Councillor Fletcher, you've got a question?
What little question, little statement that I think this was previous. This tenant engagement was initiated when? What was the beginning of this refresh? Sheila, do you remember?
Oh my gosh.
It goes back a couple of years.
Was it under the previous CEO, not you acting, not the Kevin, under the previous CEO?
Correct.
Under the Milsom, when Kathy Milsom was CEO? So was it?
Yeah.
So, of these communities that don't have anybody there yet, I'm very interested. When we look at it's of 303 communities, 57 were in phase 1, and only how many? 39 that have actual tenant reps now, or tenant engagement.
So phase 1, the 39 leaders in place has gone up to 43.
Okay.
Partial has gone up to 11. We're still working on 9.
Okay. So if I look at that is 43 communities full, 260 without. And I'm wondering, of the 260 communities, who had a actual tenant rep in place from the old model? Do we have any idea?
I'm sure we could pull that.
So I am interested in that. And I'm going to go back to this. This doesn't belong to this board. This was initiated long ago. And, but there were tenant reps in place that met together, talked about things, and talked about, anyway, they were brought together under the aegis of TCHC. They were then, at a certain point, a decision was made that they were no longer tenant reps. So we made a decision to replace them and kick them out, basically, which a lot of people are upset about how they were treated. I think everyone should know that. Tenants that had been in place for quite a few years, they're upset. There's nothing in their place. So I don't like to rub on this stone in my shoe all the time, but I'm very concerned about it. So I'd like to know who had them. And it's a big job to go out and do that. I think we were it was inopportune to get rid of everybody before we have any new people in place. That's the first thing. And second, many of these people have been very devoted to their communities, to TCHC. They supported so many things that people still knock on their doors. There was never a word of thanks, just we have to have something new. It was driven by very loud voices. And we've ended up with a situation, I get it, COVID, but we've ended up with a very difficult situation with no representation in 260 communities still. So that's the point I want to make. Don't know how we can dig out, but I would like to know where those places were that don't have anybody, if they actually had somebody there, because that person was fired and by the board. And they're probably still active out there. And I think probably our on the ground people will know who's active or not active, we have to say, especially during COVID, because people are going to knock on the door of people that have been longstanding representatives. of their communities. That's just the point I want to make, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or comments from the committee members? No? All right, motion to approve the, Marcel has a question or a comment. Marcel, go ahead.
I think a lot of times when I think with the lack of engagement with tenant reps or getting people on board to be tenant reps, as I think sometimes I don't really know any delicate way to say this, but I think a lot of times people feel like they're not being listened to, and they're just, it's just being entertained for a little bit, and then the decisions are made regardless of what input they've had. And that's kind of like the things I've heard, right? So that's also something to take into consideration. That's it.
Thank you,
Okay.
Marcel.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you. All right, seeing no further questions or comments, motion to receive the report. Moved by Councilor Nunziata. All in favor? Thank you. Next item is the annual pest control report. And all of the tables are there. This is, and I think Councillor Fletcher mentioned earlier that she would like to see this, if possible, broken out by region. Is that correct, Councillor Fletcher? Councillor Fletcher?
I was on. Yes, please. Thank you. I'd like to. And I just want to know about the 902 people that had more than one, they had over 3 sprayings. Could we hear a little bit more about that? And that must be labor intensive. And then
you said 903 people had what, Paula?
more than 3 sprayings. That's what I'm.
Okay.
Table 4. Yeah. Richard?
Yeah, more than 3. Yeah.
Richard, could you speak to that?
I'm
Richard,
sorry, I was double muted. I'm sorry, I was double muted. Yeah, there is a significant number of individuals that did receive more than the 3 treatments. What we had to do during COVID was we recognized that all pest control treatments by Health Canada guidelines required individuals to vacate their homes for a period of 4 to 6 hours. So as part of our response to COVID, what we did do was work with the pest control industry or our providers to modify the treatments, limit the need for tenants to vacate their homes, which means we increased our use of mechanical treatments, allowed for us to execute treatments or modified treatments with tenants in place. And there was significant limitations to the success of those treatments by and large. So we were using steaming, vacuuming, very targeted applications of pesticides in order to limit people having to vacate their home.
Any further questions?
Was that typical of other times? Do you have a table you can compare it to? That was not compared.
I do not have
2019 and 2020. So I think that we should understand if that's really the case, or there's just people that are chronically with pests, or chronically we're not fixing them well. So I can't see, since we have the year-over-year average, we don't have the year-over-year multiple treatments. So I'd like that chart.
I can bring that
For our board meeting.
Okay.
But have it broken down by zone. And then I'd like to know with some of those, where are they concentrated in? How about seniors? That's number 1. And how about vulnerable individuals, number 2? Are they concentrated in certain areas, certain buildings? I mean, I think you've all heard me talk about Fairlawn, that went from a lovely seniors building to a bed bug infested place and remains, it's taken out of the seniors portfolio. They'll all tell you about it. So that's a concern to me. And then related to the annual inspections report, is there any coordination or anything that has to do with clutter, unit condition, etc., and bed bug or pest control, pest infestation. So I know we're not on that. I'll come to that in a minute, but
Sorry, what's the question?
I'm looking at, first of all, year over year for this same chart, breakdown by region, and including seniors. And then there is this our next report has to do with unit condition and clutter, et cetera, et cetera. I want to know if there's any correlation between any of those issues and pest control. And I think Richard could probably give us kind of a good guess on that one. I don't know.
There would be a correlation. Right. There would be a correlation between unit conditions and the pest infestations or chronic pest infestation. Yes, but I can bring it back with numbers.
Yeah, let's see how many repeat offenders are there, and then what extra assistance they need, because I think we all know that once we have one infestation, it travels in the building. So supporting tenants is supporting all the tenants is really closely managing those units that have pest control. So where are they? And I know you know all of that and you're doing that. Just want to make sure that we're working at the highest level possible and correlate, take the seniors out so the new seniors unit can really start looking at any issues in any buildings there. It's way harder for seniors to leave.
Okay, any other committee members with questions or comments? No? All right, a motion to receive, moved by Uba. Okay, all in favor? That's moved, passed, okay. Next, we have the annual unit inspections report. This is the one that Councillor Fletcher was referring to in regard to clutter and hoarding. And okay, are there any questions from committee members?
I do. I would just on page 88, number of units rated up between 7 and 9, called the clutter scale, but really it is the hoarding scale and it's the fire department scale that they use. That's at the very top. If you've ever seen a picture of a 9,
Yeah.
they get in. So that's a significant number of units. Are they clustered in certain places, certain buildings, or would you identify that for me, please?
Or are they mostly seniors or not seniors? That would be good to know.
So geographically, they are spread out throughout the city of Toronto. What we're currently doing as part of our strategic initiatives is starting to cluster those against each hub. So as we build out profiles against each of the hub, this will actually land against the hub profiles. There's 7 to 9 specifically.
So who deals with the 7 to 9s now? Because that is it's a big supportive piece. And how many are seniors and how many aren't? Do you happen to know, Richard?
I would have to report back. I could break that data out by seniors and the family portfolio for the board meeting. Absolutely. As far as the follow-up activities, we do have established process for following up on units with excessive clutter, most specifically when it impedes on the fire and life safety of the building as a whole. That is managed locally through the TSC, CSC, and the integrated team, and additional service and support is facilitated through the Tenancy Resolutions Office, including access to city programs such as the Spider Situation Table. We've established additional supports through Toronto Hoarding Support Network, enhanced access to the Extreme Clean program, and we've additionally secured a partnership with Toronto Employment and Social Services to access the extreme HSF funding.
If I could, if you think about the general manager and their team, they have carriage of the full spectrum of the tenancy. End to end, they're the generalist, they're the GP. Richard and his team are the specialists. So if a GM regional team have issues with extreme clutter, they would come to Richard and his team to put a program in place to address it. And it's challenge. It's hard work to help someone that has those issues.
Yes, very hard work.
Any further questions, Councillor Fletcher?
Good, thank you.
Okay. Any other committee members with questions? Okay, I have a question. Is there really anything we can do if we have somebody that's a hoarder? I mean, we can't go in and pick up their stuff and confiscate it and trash it if they've got 5 years worth of newspapers, or if they have, you know, excessive clutter. I mean, is it really not just sort of moral suasion that we have at our disposal?
So we use a process that includes access to programs such as SPIDER. We partner with Toronto Public Health, Toronto Municipal Licensing and Standards under bylaw, as well as Toronto Fire Services. We do a number of different joint inspections of the home. And ultimately, it's really dependent on the level of clutter within the unit. What are they collecting? So in scenarios where they're flammable liquids, for example, those are the most severe in nature, and they do require timely follow-up. And in other cases, we will use the landlord-tenant board not to seek eviction, but rather to seek a mediated remedy to those cases.
And then are you allowed? Is staff allowed at any point in time to go in and actually clean things out?
Technically, we shouldn't be going in and touching the personal belongings of an individual unless it was something like a flammable liquid. So if they were collecting things such as aerosols on the stove, for example, or gas cans within the unit, we do have the ability to remove those from the unit itself. If it's just regular contents, example, you know, newspapers or appliances, typically that's not what we would do. We would work through the legal channels.
And is there a TCHC policy on pets or regulation on pets?
It would have to meet municipal bylaw, which is a combination of 6, right?
Oh, okay. So I was just wondering, like,
municipal bylaw.
I was wondering, can somebody have like 15 cats in their apartment?
They may not.
They may
It would
not.
be a combination totaling 6, yes.
Got it. Okay. Councillor Nunziata.
Glad that brought up cats, because it was an incident in my ward. I think at Falstaff, Sheila, you remember that, where one tenant had about 40 or 50 cats, and we had to go in and remove it. Yeah, that took a while, but there was a lot of issues on that. Yeah.
And we've heard, you know, it's also disruptive for the tenants that live next door to the people that have 50 cats. It's horrible.
Any further questions, comments?
I just want to clarify, Toronto Fire has accessibility that others don't. If do they or don't they?
What was that?
Toronto Fire, what accessibility do they have if they're finding a number 9 hoarding situation? Do they have different access abilities than regular staff or not?
So they do have different rights of entry, as does municipal licensing and standard. So they would have different rights of entry into a unit. Similarly, they would not remove the excessive clutter themselves, but would use the tools available to them, including charges.
So they can record, well, easier in some cases than they have that right of entry. MLS has it, Fire has it, yeah. And Oxford Health also has it for different things, as we now know, lots of powers. Okay. And
absolutely. And
some of these tenants really should be in supportive housing, should they not, that are hoarding?
Typically unit conditions, and we do, when we investigate unit condition issues, whether it be pests or, you know, sanitation or hoarding cases, What we do identify is that in many cases, the conditions within the unit are symptomatic of other issues going on in the tenancy or in the person's world, and a higher level of support is required. And that's why we access programs such as Spider.
Right. Okay. And how many times does Spider help out?
We are accessing Spider upwards of about 75 cases a year.
Okay, so that's great. Thank you. That's a very effective program. I use it a
John,
lot.
I think Marcel had a question.
Marcel, okay.
Yeah, I was just wondering, as far as like the hoarding situation, is it possible to kind of look at the problem in a different angle? Like instead of like having to clear the things out, because sometimes people have some kind of attachment to it. But is there any way that you could maybe work with OW if they're on OW or ODSP, and the possibility of like working something with a storage unit, like a storage facility where they could put their things, and that way they're not really losing anything, and you know.
So hoarding in itself is a mental health diagnosis, and what we have learned through the past is that when we made storage available to an individual to facilitate the movement of items out of the unit and into storage, whether it be on site or elsewhere, that it typically translates to additional collection within the unit once there's space available. That being said, we do work with Toronto Employment and Social Services as part of, as a membership at the Spider table, and they do make additional dollars available, whether it's to facilitate extreme clean type services, additional storage, and then we also partner with the Toronto Hoarding Support Network that works with hoarding coaches, and they do home visits and work with an individual to reduce and prioritize.
Okay.
Anything further, Marcel? No? Okay, motion to receive this report. Moved by Councillor Nunziata. All in favor? All right, that's moved on. Next item is the smoke-free policy update. Item F. Have we any questions from committee members on this? Okay, any questions or comments? All right. Seeing none, a motion to receive the report. Moved by Marcel. Should you move this? Moved by Marcel. All in favor? And then the last item on the agenda, item 7, the CSU annual report to the Toronto Police Services Board.
And we have a deputant in relation to
deputant.
this
Yes.
item, Anita Dressler, and I believe that Ms. Dressler is on the line.
Yes, I am.
Good morning, Anita. You've got 5 minutes for your deputation.
Thank you. Can you hear me on unmute?
Yes, we can hear you.
I just unmuted. I was hoping that you could hear me that way.
We can hear you.
All right, thank you. Good morning, Chair and committee members. What department does a lot for us and we forget to acknowledge them? Our CSU Community Service Unit is constantly working to protect us. The officers under the direction of Chief Billy Manderson and his deputy, Dave Sabetsky, are amazing. CSU officers, like Al Benton and Vanessa Ward, are examples of excellence, as are the men and women who are on patrol. Their duties are the security and protection of approximately 110,000 tenants in 2,100 buildings. They serve throughout the city. Just think, they serve more people than most cities and towns in Ontario. When we are angry, anxious, and vulnerable, we call them. They respond. They don't know what they're going to get into. It could be a mental health crisis, a family feud, a person high on drugs, a senior who is just lonely and needs someone to talk to. or some youth or great gangs in their areas. They work closely with Metro Police. They patrol our areas near and in the buildings late into the night. They find people sleeping in the community room and stairwells, many high on drugs or too drugs that they can't even stand up. They deal with each and every incident professionally, responsibly, and with the utmost respect and care. This is not by accident. They have been through training and briefings. The special constables have great leadership. The deputation that I'm doing today is very different than 4 years ago, when I, for one, criticized this very unit. As chair of seniors voice, I gave a very damning deputation. Some of my words were really harsh. I'm sure that Chief Anderson was angered, but I give him credit. 2 weeks later, he agreed to meet with 2 other advocates and myself. When we met, he was still annoyed, but he gave us the allotted time to come and understand each other. My motive was for better services for the safety of tenants that live in TSC buildings and communities. He took our words seriously and the scenarios that we presented. We have collaborated often since then. This was the start of a bigger and better CSU. I have witnessed the changes. Amazingly enough, we have a group of dedicated people who care about our safety. Those tenants who are creating issues in buildings are troublesome. But when tenants see the CSU in their building, they are relieved. They feel that they can sleep at night because they feel that they're protected, especially in high-risk buildings. Toronto Police cannot be everywhere, but the extra support having the CSU with special constables creates a sense of safety and security. Some of our tenants do not understand or appreciate what has and is being done for them. Many tenants do not realize some of the hurdles that we all have to deal with. Everything from being pushed and spat on, verbally abused, or to remove a person from the building that smells so bad that you could get it. Handling fights between tenants, noise complaints, lockouts, and sudden death. They patrol dark areas surrounding our buildings, not knowing if they're going to be shot at. These men and women are people with families and friends who love them and pray for their safety. Their job is to provide safety and security to the tenants. They have succeeded. I live in a low-risk building, but when we see an officer or senior tenant smile and feel that these officers actually care about them. All tenants should thank these officers who make a difference in our community. Therefore, I believe strongly that this committee and the board should acknowledge the chief and his deputy on behalf of all the men and women who work in this unit. I'm closing. I send my sincere condolences to the members of CSU who worked for new Constable Northrop. May his memory be a blessing, and thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for the deputation, and thank you for submitting that prior to the meeting so that we could follow along. Questions of the deputant?
Yeah, I just have a question. Anita, how long have you lived in TCHC? Or did you old city home or?
I've actually lived in TCHC for 10 years. I've always volunteered or I've only advocated for 10 years. I've lived here. I've seen so many changes. We have so many good people behind the scenes.
That's my question. You've lived for 10 years. Okay, that's clear. You're not a long-time tenant. You're 10-year. And did you say you were representing a seniors group? Just tell me about that.
Seniors Voice. Seniors Voice has been around for about 7 years. We used to go into buildings and tenant services basically put barriers up to stop us. We did presentations and we encouraged tenants to work collaboratively with staff. And we were very effective. And many departments like facilities or pest control or OACH really depended on the reports that we issued after we visited these buildings.
I see. You an official committee for TCHC? I didn't think that was the case.
Not really. We never had any actual funding. The tenants ourselves are very dedicated and we've laid out money out of our own pocket. We've gone out to buildings with way back Joan White and previously, and we just are advocates trying to make a real difference. And I want to thank this committee. It seems like you are listening. And Paula, you are a mainstay in your constituency.
Well, thank you for that. But this is just about the CSU. So anyway, that's fine. Thank you for your answers, Anita. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any further questions of the deputant? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much for your deputation, for coming and for being patient. So now
thank you.
Thank you. So now to the committee members on the report itself. Have we some questions? And Sheila, I didn't know if there was to be a presentation or a commentary, but you know, or shall we just go in with questions?
We're happy to take questions.
Okay. I've got a couple, but I'm going to let the committee members go first. Horace?
You go ahead.
Okay. On the table under crime and order management, it refers at the last item. It refers to EMCPA. What is that?
Bill?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I can answer that. That's the Emergency Measures and Civil Protection Act. It's relevant to a lot of the orders relating to COVID.
Okay. All right. That's what that is. Okay. And I mean, that was great to hear that, have that deputation and to get that feedback, and congratulations are well done to you. I would say, I don't know if it's congratulations, but well done to you for you know, meeting with her and the job that you've done with your group. Does your force, do they feel, your staff, do they feel that they are well enough equipped for the job in terms of what they carry every day, and in terms of you know, the number that are patrolling? I presume they patrol in pairs.
Our team submits. We have a health and safety committee as well as representation working in collaboration with Officer 529, our labor partner, and we receive feedback on this on a regular basis. Also, a point of feedback is that there's current legislative working groups as new regulations are being made out relevant to equipment and training for special constables, which we've utilized that feedback to give the province. As far as the current equipment they carry the equipment that is legislated, allowable under legislation, and authorized under the Memorandum of Understanding between the board and the Police Services Board. That includes such things as OC spray and foam, as well as a baton, and then more standard items such as ballistic vests and the carrying of handcuffs, and of course relevant training and de-escalation techniques. So I would say yes, we carry all that we're able to currently. There are varying opinions on what could be seen in the future, what we'd like to have been seen in the future, such things as CEWs, things to utilize to bring to a close any escalating issues in a safer manner for all persons involved. That's always a discussion topic. And recognizing where we can go in the future or may need to go in the future will be very specific to both our Memorandum of Understanding and what the prescribed regulations coming in the near future state.
They don't carry a taser?
No, they do not currently, no.
Is there any sense that they feel that that's necessary, or is there a general feeling that it's unnecessary?
The feedback from OPSU 529, this was a topic of discussion just over a year ago. And I do know at that time it was requested and endorsed by OPSU 529 that there are a number in the membership that would desire to see it. And I do know that we wrote a briefing note, I believe, back then on the topic, endorsing it at that time. How that will fit into the coming regulations is yet to be seen.
And then on the page 103 or page 7 of the report, it refers to the training, annual use of force, special constable training, first aid, CPR, refresher trained leadership. Is there anti-Black racism training, I would imagine, is incorporated into some of that?
Yes, there certainly is. Not only the CABR training, but one of the things we started, in addition to baseline training when I arrived here in 2017, was we utilize the Canadian Police Knowledge Network online training for such things as unconscious bias and understanding racism. As well, we had a company that would come in annually and address all staff within CSU on diversity and racism. And as well, we're working through all staff and the CABR training. So, and it's ongoing annually, as well as when they initially start.
And then my last question is are any of your, or are any, or how many of your staff, your officers, former tenants of TCHC?
We don't have that. I'm aware of some of the members that are tenants or former tenants. I can't speak to specific numbers because that data isn't collected within my realm.
Okay, I was just curious. I didn't know if we have any kind of outreach program, or, you know, not necessarily recruiting, but I didn't know if we had any kind of outreach program to try to.
We are actively working, and it's one of the things we're attempting to develop, and has had some challenges under COVID, is that we do want to develop opportunities for our tenants to work with us and find employment with us. And we do have different levels of outreach, as well as we're currently in the process of developing what we hope to be a sort of called cadet program. In other words, we want to mentor youth and bring them into opportunities, even if it's not to work as a special constable, perhaps to work with CSU, or even broader to recognize opportunities within TCHC itself. So we're currently working with teams in the organization to develop that.
Right. And Sheila, you wanted to jump in?
I just wanted to say, and Evelyn Alfonso is on the line as well, that Evelyn and her team, along with Nadia, have been working closely with Bill on their action plan for confronting anti-Black racism. And if you would like, Evelyn could speak to that if that's of interest.
Got it. Okay. Okay, Uba.
Thanks for the presentation. Thanks for the presentation, William. And I just have, I know it's in little bit of enforcement as well as community development. Do you have sometimes trainings where the CSUs get culturally sensitivity trainings? For instance, to go to a house, a woman who's wearing hijab, what to do and what have you, or diverse. It doesn't have to be a woman with hijab. It could be diverse background, because we know our property, it's very diverse.
Yes, absolutely. That's part of the initial recruit training, as well as the annual training. And that's what we were using the Center for Diversity for, where they were contracted to speak specifically to recognizing that, the impacts of attendance, particularly in uniform, at different households, and recognizing that different cultures have different interactions or understanding of persons with authority, and respecting particular beliefs and practices within a household, for example. Whether that be appreciating why in certain households it may be important to remove shoes, and other households it may be entering houses of worship in an investigation, whether to wear a head covering or not wear a head covering, or the manner in which people are addressed. Right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any further questions from committee members? Marcel?
Let's John after Marcel, please. Thanks.
Sorry, Paul, I can't see your face.
There's my face. After Marcel, would you mind putting
Yes.
down?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't have anything.
Marcel's okay. I just didn't see that you were interested. Your camera's not on, Paul. So just please go ahead.
No, I think it's on. It's not coming.
Oh, there it is. All right.
I think I'm very low on battery. I just wondered, number one, this is having a chief and a deputy is fairly new. That was the case before. When did that start? Or has that always been the case?
You're asking about the title?
Correct.
So Bill his job is Senior Director of CSU.
So
when did you introduce Chief into your?
I'm sorry, I interrupted. Tell me again. The title is Senior Director.
Yes, I can speak to that if you wish. And I apologize. There's a lawnmower on a lawn tractor going past the office window, which is difficult to hear. So
Bill, you didn't name yourself. The corporation named it. So I'm going to Sheila. Sorry. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
So Bill's title is Senior Director of Community Safety Unit, CSU.
And so where do we get chief and deputy chief now? That's not the title.
So chief and deputy and sergeant and staff sergeant and those levels of rank are specific to the wearing of a uniform. So visually and in reference to uniform, they are recognized levels. For example, sergeant, staff sergeant, deputy chief of management. Similar to other special constable services and aligned with the police service, similar as described under the Police Services Act. So, for example, in confirming the rank attributed to a uniform, we do that with the approval of the Toronto Police Service, acting on behalf of the Toronto Police Services Board. The corporate positions are as Sheila described. So my position is Senior Director. The uniform rank identified to the wearing of a uniform would be the Chief Special Constable.
And Bill, just describe.
And that is now internal for your unit. That's your role in the unit.
I apologize. I only heard the last half.
Sorry, I don't even have a lawnmower going here. I think I have a garbage truck going here. I'm just interested in, now we're calling you chief, but you're the Senior Director of Community Safety there, and I'm to Sheila. Will this be discussed in our conversation around the VRP?
Sure. It will.
This is people that will be discussed.
Yeah. And if I could, what we will also bring some clarity to, because I don't think it's well understood, we have a memorandum of understanding with TPS. There are what come with that memorandum of understanding and the establishment of special constables are a set of regulations that Bill operates under. And I wanted to do a deep dive on that with the advisory body. And if you look at the org chart that is part of Bill's annual report, you will see corporate titles, and you will also see under the corporate title in a bracket the designation that the memorandum of understanding brings to the position. So if you look at the upper tiers of the chart, you see Bill is Senior Director of the Community Safety Unit, yep, in bracket Chief Special Constable.
That's correct. So I'll just jump in because I'm losing battery. So technically, our chart is the Senior Director of Community Safety. The technical term based on the MOU with the TPS is Chief Special Constable. Would it be right to say it like that?
Correct.
But for our purposes,
yes,
we are dealing with the Senior Director of Community Safety. Correct?
Correct.
That's the name. So I'm just concerned that we're starting to, anyway, I'll come back to that. I wanted to clarify. And then I'll just ask you, Bill, how many in the new VRP hiring, or I'll ask you, Sheila, how many were former officers, TPS officers?
So what I understand of Bill's complement, and we haven't broken it down yet by VRP, but of Bill's complement of 252 individuals, there are 16 individuals who come from a policing background.
Right.
And
I'll
just gonna
just
ask Bill.
Yeah.
to confirm that
ask
number.
Bill because he's hired all of VRP. And are all those 16 hired through the VRP bill?
No, they are not. The VRP officers deployed in communities, none of those officers, to my knowledge, have a past police background. There are components of the management team, as we previously reported, that we're aware of that have prior policing backgrounds, which is benefit us in part of our plan and mentoring and developing staff internally to have the tools for the future. I do recall the number 16 as Sheila had mentioned as the number, and I do recall that it was broken down. Some were actually special constable related, whereas others were actually in non-special constable positions in support of the unit.
So Bill, since you hired all those folks, how many were hired for under your time and the VRP?
How many of the 16? That's the question?
And
Yeah.
under VRP, I'm not asking you to go back and back. We're under the
Oh, well, during none were hired specifically for VRP, but under the time since VRP's been brought in.
Yeah, let's not. There was a new hiring of a certain number of. We went from 17 million to $33 million. That was a big uptick in hiring. And that was associated with new officers, however they're configured in the VRP or your CSU. I'm interested, let's say from 2019 till today. How about we ask that question? That should be easier.
I mean, I'm hazarding a guess because the hirings are going on since 2017, but I would hazard at least half of them.
2017 then. You're saying half of those 16 are from 2017?
No, I'd say from 2019, at least half of them.
Oh,
I would say all of them, to my knowledge,
half. Okay.
all of the staff that were aware of the policing backgrounds have come in since 2017.
Tell me that again. I missed it.
So to the best of my knowledge, anyone with a policing background that was hired of those 16 have been since 2017.
Okay, 2017, 16, and since you're there, 9. Okay, now on this org chart, you say they're not out on the field, that they're in the org chart. Where would they be in the org chart now? Would it be the deputy senior manager? Would it be the operations senior manager, deputy chief?
So both senior managers have a prior policing background.
So that would be the senior manager and the corporate senior manager. There's 2 deputies on this chart.
Yes.
And they both have that. And have they ever, but they weren't a CSU previously, were they?
No, not previously, no.
So they're not really that familiar with TCHC. They haven't been in TCHC as a CSU officer. What other admin positions like this? Are there any other training sergeant, manager, planning, business and report? Because you've indicated they're not out in the VRP, but they're somewhere on the org chart.
So some of the managers, for example, some of the managers in like the investigations manager has prior policing background. At least 2 of the platoon staff sergeant positions. The training sergeant or training staff sergeant is a manager with prior police background because of the police training component. So,
Bill, you could take your org chart and highlight those individuals that have a police background. Correct?
Question is, I'm assuming from this org chart that those are part of your 9 since the reorg. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, Councillor. I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You've got the org chart here, and I think this is a refreshed org chart since you've become the director. And of those positions we're talking about, of the former police officers in those managerial positions, I'm going to assume that many of them are from the 9 you described hiring after 2019, or is it the 16 since 2017?
I believe most, if not all, since 2017, and I'm including myself in that number.
Okay. All right. So there's 7, 2017, and 9, 2019 and beyond. So that would be helpful to see that, Bill. Appreciate that, Sheila. And I just want to be clear that CSU reports to, I'm interested in how and we'll get to this in our committee. I'm going to have to turn my thing off, John, because I'm running right out of
Okay.
story. That on the ground, when you're in situations, and our tenancy management model is general manager, that's their bailiwick. Everybody feeds into the general manager. Everything everybody does feeds into the general manager, who then feeds into the COO, acting, or Sheila when she's back in that position. Or do we have 2 streams? There's a general manager, and then there's a CSU that performs separately. So I really need to know tenancy management. If it's fragmented, is not tenancy management anymore. So could you describe that a little bit, Sheila, please?
Sure, happy to. So we have as you've described, we have a regional structure, 3 GMs with management teams who manage, as I've said, the life cycle of a tenant end to end. We also have reporting up to the COO, a number of specialist divisions. You heard Richard Groach today, our tenancy resolution officer. You heard Nadia Govaya, our program and partnership director. You have facilities management who deliver capital and preventive maintenance. You have Bill and his team who deliver security. So yes, we have 3 regions, 3 GMs who have end-to-end carriage of our tenancies, but there are supporting central specialists who work with the GMs in their capacity as having overall carriage of a region.
So I'm unclear about that. Are they reporting to you, or they're going to the GMs for tenancy?
I have 8 direct reports. And
we're a little bit stretching it here in terms of the CSU report to the police services.
But it really has to do with when it's too fragmented, you don't have okay, I get it. Thanks, John.
Okay. Any further questions on the report? Sorry, Uba?
I know, John, we're not talking about this, and I don't want to be off topic, but I am with Paula, because I'm sure, and I'm not questioning how many people that we hire or what have you. There's a lot of confusion in terms of who does what. So if we can have some sort of a written document where we know from A to Z who does what, the structure, the hierarchy, what have you, that would be greatly appreciated. So I'm confused too. Thanks.
So we are trying to do that, to make that very clear to tenants through the hubs, right? You have, at a hub level, you have your, and I know we're off topic here, but you have, and I'd be happy to walk you through it. You have your cleaners, your superintendent, your maintenance people, you have the frontline team that deliver access and support, the tenant service coordinators, CSU special constables are part of that local hub team that works with tenant leadership in each hub to solve local issues. If they can't solve the local issues, then they go to their management team. And when we open a hub, we put it right up on the wall. These are your contacts for any and all issues that you can address through your hub. And
Thank you, Sheila. But I know I don't want to dwell on this specific thing because I know we're out of we're not talking about this piece. But and it's not only for me. I heard a lot of people that, and anytime we have a new system, I understand confusion comes, clarity are needed, and what have you. So we can talk about this another time. It doesn't have to be now, but as long people know who does what specifically, that would be much appreciated.
Okay.
And if I can, who does what around problem tenancies? Who's got the lead, Sheila?
But we're getting off topic.
I understand, but Uba's asked for that. Please,
the GM.
Okay. Councilor Manscata, did you have a question on the report?
We are talking about the TCHC, their annual report, and this report came to the Police Services Board the other day, which we just moved receipt of. But just a question to William Anderson. So am I correct to say that in the past few years that there has been an increase in hiring because of the demand in some of our buildings from tenants wanting to see more in their buildings, and you know, some of them are asking for 24/7 to have our officers in the buildings. Is that the reason?
It's one of the contributing reasons. There's with the VRP program, as well as the request of tenants for more presence, along with assessing the difference between utilizing special constables versus third-party security.
Yeah, so I know that when we had a few shootings at Falstaff, when we had our community meetings, one thing I did hear from the tenants is that they want to see more. They want to see more officers, special constable officers, or officers in the building. But at the same time, there's one question that was asked that they would like, because there's that engagement with tenants, and a lot of them, as we heard from the deputation, that they do talk and they do feel a lot more safer when they see them, is if they could have the same officers in the building rather than change, so they get to know the tenants and there's more of that relationship with tenants and the special constables. And that was one question that came up, especially in these problem buildings where you want to have the tenants to engage and have that relationship with the special constables in their building.
Yes, Councillor, and that's one of the underlying reasons for the hiring. And part of what's been done, we started in 2018, is taking all the officers and aligning them with addresses within communities, so that when they were not reacting to being dispatched, that proactively they could repeatedly return to these addresses and build relationships with community members and become problem solvers. We're taking that to the next step as we move into the hub phase, and we're transferring that into their part and role as in the hub teams within communities.
Yeah, because I know, and Sheila, you were at a couple of meetings with me at Falstaff, and that was really the big question, is we want to see more, and we want to see more of them in the building and to build that relationship. So thank you to that. Sheila, if you want to just comment on some of the comments that we receive when we have shootings in our buildings and what our tenants are asking for.
Yeah, and I just want to build on what Bill said, aligning the special constables with the hubs so that special constables have a business card, they'll have their cell number on that card, they'll be able to give that card to tenants when and if they need their services. We had an incident over the weekend at Glamorgan, tragic shooting of a 16-year-old. I got an email from the GM this morning saying that the tenants are very appreciative of CSU being on site patrolling during this crisis period. So, you know, the GM absolutely has carriage of their region, but they are supported by CSU, by Nadia and her team, by Richard and his team. Think of it as doctors and specialists, right?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments on the report? All right, seeing none, motion to receive the report for information, moved by Councillor Nunziata. All in favor? All right, that concludes the agenda. Motion to adjourn from Councillor Nunziata. All in favor? All right, thank you all committee members and thank you staff.
Thank you.
Until we meet again.